Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to a special housing report brought to you in association with the BNZ. Today we're going to have a look at housing loan approvals figures. Sounds boring, but it's not, because it shows you what's really happening in the housing market and the economy generally. Now have a look at this chart. This shows the amount of housing loan approvals in the last 13 weeks or so versus the same 13 weeks a year ago. And the chart shows when it's above the red line, if you like, it's expanding, and when it's below, it's falling. And you can see this is a good history of what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years in the New Zealand housing market. For most of the period up until the end of 2007, the banks were lending quite strongly, upwards of 10 to 15% growth from a year ago in home loan approvals. Then we saw towards the end of 2008 and through early 2009, home loan approvals really dropped off as people demanded less credit, and also the banks were being a lot more careful about who they lent to and how much. And then we saw that period last year, from around about February, March, April onwards, when interest rates had really fallen sharply, and some people thought it was time to jump back into the housing market. So they turned up to their bank and asked for some extra money, and they got it. And that was the thing. You saw an increase in bank lending around about March, April last year. And that helped bolster the housing market, and prices rebounded a bit off their lows. But what's interesting is that in the last 2 to 3 months, home loan approvals have really dropped off quite sharply. And in the last week's data, which has just come out, we can see that home loan approvals in the last 2 to 3 months are down 25% on the same period a year ago. So what we're seeing in the housing market now is a lack of credit to push up house prices. The banks are being much more careful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there just isn't that much demand coming through. People don't want to buy at these prices. And secondly, the banks want to be careful not to lend too much, because all around the world, and it's the same here in New Zealand, regulators are pushing the banks to put aside more capital to back their lending. And also, the banks are struggling to get easy, cheap, hot money from the hot money markets, partly because the Reserve Bank is stopping them from accessing those markets. So there we have it. If you're wondering why the housing market isn't bubbling along strongly, particularly as the economy recovers, here it is. Home loan approvals have dropped off sharply. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special housing report brought to you in association with the BNZ.